experience, they tend to be driven by people who are slightly older, slightly more conservative, and slightly slower than I'd like to be. But not all Peugeots are created equal. For instance, this one is made by Peugeot Sport. And what that means is it can do stuff like this. Woo! We're driving a Peugeot 308 GTI. It really does have that hot hatch thing down pretty well. Peugeot Sport have actually gone to quite a lot of trouble to make this a really high performance car. The 1600cc turbocharged engine delivers 200 kilowatts of peak power, and that's a lot. And it also makes 330 newton meters of peak torque, all the way from 1900 RPM all the way up to 6000 RPM, and that's a very broad torque band. What that means in the end is a 0 to 100k time of 6 seconds flat and a top speed electronically governed to 250 kilometers an hour. So it really rocks. At $58,990, the 308 GTI is not inexpensive, but it's got quite a good pedigree. It's available only in manual transmission, so that's really nice to my mind, because it says that Peugeot Sport really understands that this sort of car only ever really delivers to its potential when you have full control of the gears with a clutch pedal. The other thing is that's really quite nice about the 308 is it only weighs 1205 kgs. Now that's really quite lightweight in an age where we're used to hatchbacks weighing 1500 kilograms. So 1200 kgs is pretty lightweight, and that means that 200 kilowatts of power is able to pick the thing up and hurl it down the road really quickly. The other thing that the low weight gives this car is a real responsiveness to all inputs, whether it be steering, braking, or acceleration. The wheel is really quite small. You really hop in the car and you notice that, well, this steering wheel is tiny. And the other thing I noticed is that it is set low, or it needs to be set low if you were to all have a decent view of the instruments, because the instruments are only able to be seen above the wheel, so that means the wheel needs to be set quite low. It's got a little piece of red leather stitched into the middle at the top here to give you a sort of a extra racy edge, and it does feel quite purposeful when you're sitting in this car. The whole dashboard and seating is really nicely focused on a sports driving environment. All the materials are quality feeling. They've got a nice soft touch to things like the dashboard top, and the door panels have got this nice leather on them with a red contrasting stitching to them, and there's not too much of the piano black finish that means you couldn't possibly keep it clean. So the whole interior feels quite luxurious, but with a sporting focus. The ride is pretty firm. There's two driving modes. There's a normal default mode where the car boots up into, and then there's the sport mode, which you access through this console mounted button here. When you push the sport button down, things get a bit more serious. The instruments, for a start, glow red, so that makes for a little extra drama, and the car seems to respond a lot better to throttle too. The throttle mapping changes also with that sport button. It is a sparkling drive. I mean, on tight, twisty little roads like this, that light weight just makes it such a delight to toss around. It brakes quickly, it accelerates quickly, it turns quickly. It's all those things you'd want from a hot hatch. It's really quite alive. It feels kind of fresh and eager and sort of a bit mongrel, which I like. Because the car is French, they've had to throw a quirk or two into it. And the most obvious one is that the tachometer hinges from the other side of the dial from the speedometer. So normally you see your speedometer and tachometer needles running in the same arc, in the same direction, but not in this car. The speedometer goes in the conventional direction, but the tachometer goes in the opposite direction. And while that's okay in the regular driving mode, when you switch the driving mode to sport, all the instruments glow red. So what was previously the red line, marked at about 6,000 RPM, now is just another number. So there's no visible cue as to where the red line is on the tachometer. And I've found myself bumping into the rev limiter on a number of occasions where ordinarily I wouldn't, because I try to drive, you know, relatively empathetically to the mechanicals of the car. I don't like hitting rev limiters, but it's really hard not to in this case. It requires a bit of a double take, and when you're pressing on and things are getting a bit busy in the cockpit, it's just one less thing that you'd want to have to do. So I'm sorry Peugeot, but I've kept bumping into your rev limiter simply because I'm not used to the tachometer going that direction. Peugeot Sport have gone pretty hardcore with the 308 GTI. The Torsen diff, for instance, has been calibrated to work with the power steering and the electronic stability control to allow a little bit of drift in bends. And you can also disable the electronic stability control completely, whereas some cars you can turn it down to minimal input, but it's still there. Not with this thing. If you want to go backwards through a hedge at light speed, you can. I don't want to. The only downside I think really, as I can feel from a driving package, is the gearbox. The ratios are nice. It's quite shortly geared, so at 100 kilometers an hour in sixth, for instance, we're doing 2,500 RPM. So that's about 300 or 400 RPM up on most cars. So the gearbox is certainly well configured for sporting ability, but the actuation of those gears through this gear lever is not particularly precise. It's a little bit rubbery, a little bit sort of gluggy, and the big knob is nice to hang on to, but as I say, it's not really dialing up nice slick type gear changes. So that's really the only dynamic downside I can detect at this stage. I've found this car extremely rewarding. It's fun to drive, that's the main thing. It's really fun. It's that lightweight, that 1200 kg weight, which also contributes to a combined fuel economy of 6 litres per 100 kilometres. And it's just very confidence inspiring, very chuckable. Yeah, it's really nicely set up for the sporting enthusiast. So well done Peugeot and Peugeot Sport, you've done a bloody good job with the 308 GTI.